Hey there, Wendy here with Jazzydoodledesigns. Apologies for the voice. This bug is just really lingering on. But I am feeling better, and I thought I would work in this book, Mouse Yururi by Makiko Inatomi. Now, my bestie Christine said that she was going to be doing this. Let me zoom out. This double page spread here. I have so much stuff on my desk. Okay, so of course I decided, oh, well, I want to be a part of that. And so I said, do you want a buddy color on it? And she said, sure. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, the leaves of it all. But anyway, so I think I was going to use zig markers, but they don't bleed through, but they do ghost a little bit. So you can see a little bit of ghosting here. I'll try and zoom in when I edit. And then I looked at pip pens and I don't know. It wasn't the direction I wanted to go or the look I was going for with the pip pens. I felt like they would be, I don't know, maybe just a little too much. And so I've decided I'm going to do it with, I'm going to base it at least with Albrecht Durer colored pencils. And then I may go back in over them dry, or I may pull out the Polychromos because they do match. But this would be a very, very long color along on the channel. So I think what I'm going to do is I am going to do a few leaves and show you my process with leaves, and then step away from the camera, finish up all the leaves, come back on camera, talk about the berries. I'm thinking of doing both red and kind of like the purple blackberries type of thing. And so I will show you both sets of those, like a couple of examples of those, and then I will step back and finish those. Then I'll do a basket and then step back and do the basket. I think that's the best way to go because, you know, a lot of this is similar, and even some of the flowers over here, I think these are primrose, or I don't know, maybe they're the flowers that go with strawberries. I'll have to look that up. But anyway, I think that I can do it that way and keep it a reasonable walkthrough. Plus, it's not going to be as much for me vocally. So that's kind of going to be my approach. And then maybe more of the main characters, I'll try and do that online or, you know, on camera so that you can see. So that is my thought process right now. The greens I've chosen are cadmium yellow, lemon 205, May green 170, earth green yellowish 168, chromium green opaque 174, and 278 green or chrome oxide green. And then I also pulled out this olive green yellowish, which is a little more brown. And so my thought is some of these leaves over in this corner might be a little darker, like to kind of frame our page, and then moving into more lighter leaves up in here. And then that way, some of this background I can do with some of these darker green colors for the ground. And then maybe over here where it looks like maybe there's some dirt, I might go in with the olive green and this brown ochre. And is it green gold? And green gold, you know, and maybe do some of those colors. Okay. The browns I have chosen probably for like mice and whatnot are the brown ochre 182, raw umber 180, and the bistra 179. So I'm thinking that for my little critters, I tend to like brown mice, but we shall see if I end up with a little gray one here or there. That might happen as well. And then I'll look at those little flowers. I usually try and do my page like with the main elements and then just see what I think would look good there. Same for like aprons and dresses and pants and those kind of things. So I think I'm going to start with that, and then I'll pop back in and we'll just see where we get to. Okay? All right, let's get started. This video is at 2x speed, like all of my videos. For my color alongs, you can slow it down to half speed if you would like to. And then maybe just hit mute so I don't go wah, wah, wah. But anyway, basically I am just going in and adding the darker color to like the veins, and then going in with the next lightest color right beside it, and then followed up by the third lightest color. Now I have chosen to activate these by using a colorless blender, just a no hoo-hoo alcohol marker colorless blender. You can buy those on 6-packs. I'll try and leave a link in the description box below. There are some cheaper brands when you can find them. But some people choose to put on a color and then activate it. I did not. And I have actually chosen to go back in a second time before I activate, just to have a little more color. In case I didn't mention it, I am using Albrecht Durer watercolor pencils. Now, Polychromos has the exact same colors, so if you don't have the Albrecht Durer, you can follow along on this color along and just use your Polychromos and just blend this out at this point, okay? Now, you could also activate this with water. There is nothing to say that you have to use the colorless blender. I will tell you, the colorless blender, the pros are that it dries immediately, so you can almost instantly go back over it and add another layer if you want. And it doesn't buckle your paper. So those are the pros. The cons are sometimes it will lighten your color, like bleach it out just a hair, and sometimes it will even maybe move the color a little bit more. Water tends to give it a more watercolor look as well. I find that when you use the alcohol marker, it almost, it's like it sets it as it activates it, as opposed to water where you can move the color and blend. So that really wasn't what I was going for. Okay, I kind of liked it more like you're seeing it here, where I go in and I just put the colors down, and when I activate it, it kind of sets. Because I have the colors already almost blended before I activate, I am not trying to move color from one side to the other. So I will say, be careful that, like when I go in with, when I go in with the colorless blender, I do start at my lighter colors and just blend towards the darker. But once again, I am not trying to move that color at all. And you can see how it kind of lightens that darker shade a little bit, okay? But you can see I'm not pushing towards the colors, I'm just more directly activating, and then I go in and add another layer to get the depth of color that I'm wanting. And then I just leave this dry, okay? These pencils can be used wet or dry interchangeably, okay? Now, my goal with this page is I am going to be using these darker colors around the edges of the paper, like down at the bottom, and as I move up the side, I'm going to use this darker color combo, okay? Oh, I guess I did activate it again. But you don't have to, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm using these darker tones here to kind of frame it. And as I move towards the center of the page, I am going to be using lighter color combinations, using the same greens. A lot of these same greens will be in there, but I'm not going to use the dark chromium green opaque and whatever that first, the chromium, this one, I'm not going to use those in the center leaves, okay? And in some cases, I'm only going to use ivory and May green, which is a very light green, right? Because I want visually for the eye to be brought into the center of the page. This is a very busy page. There's a lot going on this page. And so I feel like that's one way that helps tell the eye where to go, right? So that you're not just skipping all over the page. Okay. What else did I want to tell you? So that is my thought as I go forward. So I'm going to show you some of these darker combinations that I do, and then I'm going to skip ahead to a lighter section. Okay, so I'll be back when we get to a new color combination. Okay, so up here, these are going to be some of the lightest leaves. So you can see I'm going in very lightly with this earth green yellowish and the May green, right? These are the darkest colors that I'm going to put in. And then I'm going to be adding like the ivory. I really don't want to add in that, whatever I just flashed up, that kind of more yellow green. I felt like that would make it more like poppy. See, so I thought about it, and then I thought, no, that's going to make them too neon, right? So I went and looked, and I ended up pulling ivory, and because I want them to look maybe sun-kissed, like the sun is maybe you know, catching on them or whatever, and kind of bleaching them out. So that's kind of that's my thoughts on this, okay? And then you want to be real careful here. You see I'm starting with the white and then not trying to like scrub back and forth, but just go with the strokes. That way I'm not spreading those darker colors all over. And in some of these leaves, I put my own little veining in, right? Because they didn't really have any, which is fine. And I'm not too, like, to me, these are, because I'm kind of depicting them as being washed out, I'm not too worried about the veining, okay? I want them to look a little more solid maybe, okay? There's just the hint of veining, right? You can always go back in and add it, which I might do. Yeah, see, here I am doing that. Can you tell? This was at least a week ago. I've had quite a bit of adventure physically in my life recently that's made it a little more difficult to, normally I film all at once and edit within a day or so, but it's been a hot minute, so apologies if I sound like I don't know what I'm doing. That's usually the case, but forgiveness all the same. So that is kind of my thought with these. Now, of course, you can color them any way you want, and you could even add in a little bit of yellow if you wanted. There's no right or wrong way, right? This is just how I've kind of chosen to do it. Now, before you guys ask, these pencil things, I get a little callus on my middle finger where I hold the pencil. And Christine had some of these, and they're from Jot, J-O-T is the brand. And it looks like here in the States, they were sold at Dollar Trees. My Dollar Tree no longer has them. So Christine was kind enough to send them all the way from Canada for me, because I've really struggled to find a good pencil holder that wasn't a pain in the butt to put on and take off, and then actually helped with the problem, right? And I do find that these add a little bit of cushion, and just, I don't use them all the time, but in this case, I knew I was going to be using these green pencils for quite a bit because there's a lot of leaves, right? And so I went ahead and put them on all the pencils. So anyway, if you have a friend in Canada, you could maybe ask them, or maybe in your area, they are still selling them, because it looks like some of the box stores, like, not box stores, but office supply houses, like Staples and stuff, used to carry them, but no longer do now. Okay, so moving along. So what I'm doing here with these raspberries is I am sketching out my highlight area. I find this is probably, these are so small that it's probably a silly step given that I'm going to activate these. If I was using pencil, this is a good idea. But because I'm going to activate them, they tend to get a little washed out anyway, and I'm just going to pop in a white highlight. So don't fret about that too much. What you want to do is you want to have one half of your berries a little lighter, and then the other half a little darker. And then in between all of the grooves, you're going to add yet a darker color. So you see here, where I've done that, I've kept that little white highlight. I really like the look of that. I think it looks more natural than the white paint pen, but it's very, very hard to do when you're activating these, okay? If you're just using pencil, you can be a lot more precise. Now, I am going to be changing colors and making some a little darker and some a little lighter, some a little more orange, and then having blackberries as well. And so this is just the colors I've chosen for for my raspberries, right? So I was just showing you the color I just put down was that deep red. And now I'm going in with the middle cadmium down to add the darker spots, right? Don't be afraid to allow your berries, even in the same bunch of berries, to look different. Fruits, vegetables, flowers, leaves, it's fine to have variance. Now, you don't want a wild variance, like you wouldn't want to maybe, I shouldn't say, I'm not trying to tell you how to color, but I'm just saying that it makes sense that some of these might be darker than others. You could even add a little more purple to some than others, right? And that's okay. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm using this red violet to add my shading. Now, you can use a lot of different things. You could add a gray or a black. You can add a blue, like an indigo blue. I tested off to the side, and I just found that this was the color that I thought added a very natural looking shade, right? Whenever you start getting into browns, grays, blacks, that is going to dull your colors, and sometimes that's warranted, right? Other times, not so much. And I felt like in this picture, I wanted the vibrancy of the berries to still be there. And so I am using that red orange. And now once everything's activated, I'm just going in with the dark indigo. And once again, because this kind of will mix with my existing colors and form kind of a purple color, I feel like it's more natural than adding black. But that is a stylistic approach. It is whatever you like, okay? So next up, we're going into the blackberries, and I'm using that same dark indigo. This is going to give it more of a blue look, as opposed to, you can color blackberries using nothing but grays. I just like the look and feel of blackberries that have a little bit of blue and that have a little bit of purple. So you're going to see me add that red violet, I believe. Even this, no, it's magenta, I think, that I add, that is going to add that little pop of a reddish tone. So like right here, to me, these look more like blueberries, right? So it's all in how dark you want to make these, and whether or not you want them to be blueberries or blackberries, or like a black raspberry, which I think is kind of what I ended up with, right? It was just, it's just something I kind of toyed around with on paper, because I really felt like if I added that blue, I was adding yet another color, whereas you'll see once these are done, they're so dark that it's almost a neutral. And because I've used some of the same reds and whatnot, they tie into the other berries. Okay, but do you see how that magenta just, when you look at it, it just gives that bluish color a little bit of maybe interest, right? A little visual interest. Okay, and then that black is really designed, or the dark indigo here, these dark colors are really designed to give the berries the definition, right? So that's how I have chosen to do these. So just like with the leaves, I kind of thought it would make sense if maybe these berries were a little lighter in tone, maybe had a little more of that like unripe orange kind of coloring to them. So that's kind of what I'm playing around with here. Once again, I keep trying to keep some highlights to these berries, and you'll see towards the end, I'm like, I just gave up. But I did add some lighter tones to begin with, I believe. And then the berry below it is definitely, excuse me, is going to be a little bit lighter overall. But I just feel like it adds a little bit of a visual interest being different without being wildly different, because like it starts off with a lighter color. Okay, so for this one, I wanted these to look a little unripe, so I went ahead and added May Green. Now, I wish I would have just left them May Green instead of adding the red here, because then once I added the red, I didn't really like it. And then sometimes it happens, right? So then you just keep pushing through. I apologize. My throat is just a little messed up today. So here I try and like fix it with this brighter color, and then more of an orange, and you'll see that I don't color this color berry again. It's fine. It turns out the way I don't think anyone looking at the page is like, hey, what happened to those berries, right? Because in the end, I was able to just go ahead and change them to something very similar in color, right? It's still a little less ripe, a little more orangey, which is fine. But I actually kind of liked the look of just the May Green. I felt like it made the berries look just like they haven't ripened at all. So if you like that look, you could just leave it like that as well. Or you can follow all these steps, or you could just make it like the other reds, whichever way you like them, right? I just wanted to let you know my thoughts so you weren't like, why is she doing this? Because sometimes you take chances and you don't really like how it turns out, right? So here I'm trying again. And this time I went in with more of a yellow, right? Kind of this dark cad yellow. And this is the yellow that I'm going to use on the flowers and stuff like that, I believe. But I decided to give this unripe berry a little bit of another chance. But I'm not adding as much of this orangish red as I did before. Just a little hint of it, right? And then that way, when I activate, I go in with the yellow and push towards the orange. And I'm okay with these getting a little more orange. If they start to get too much orange, tap off your colorless blender, wipe it off if it's starting to get a little too much, okay? And if you notice how much of these colors makes a difference. So you can leave these at any step you want. And here I'm doing more of a dabbing as opposed to like a circle or something like that, because I really want to maintain some of those brighter yellowish tones. And you can see I've colored some of all the other berries, and I've shown you how to color those I think I'm going to show you how to color the purple ones in just a second. Okay, so it doesn't look like I show you that, but basically what you're going to do is you're going to go over the berry with light red violet. Then for your darker area, you're going to go in with red violet, because the first one's light red violet, number 43, then the red violet, number 44, if you're using my coloring system, and then magenta, which was number 38. Okay. You can also add a little bit of indigo into the darkness if you want, but I think I just used the red violet. Okay. If you want them a little redder, you can add a little middle cadmium red to them. Okay. So apologies for not showing you that. It's hard when I don't know, I've never really done this style of color alongs, but this 2-page spread would be quite the adventure, right? Here I'm just adding a little bit of brown to the already dark green that I had going on, just to give it a little more dimension. Okay, and as I'm coloring, I find random little leaves all the time that I missed. So you're going to see that. All right, next up is our baskets, and I'm just going in with just kind of a general shading with this light yellow ochre. This is going to be the base color, the highlight color, so to speak. And so I'm not being precious about my strokes here. I am basically just covering everything with this color, and then I'm going to activate it. Always make sure that you wipe off your brush whenever you're using a really light color like this, and be careful. You can see where I made a little swipe and I caught one of the berries and it pulled that red in. I don't think that's a real problem because these are raspberries, they're juicy, and maybe some raspberry juice spilled down, but it's not ideal, so just pay attention to that. Better than I do. Now here I'm going in between each of these little ribs of the basket, and I'm adding this bistre color. Just any warm brown color should work for this. Now I am not going to go where she doesn't have there's no ribs. I'm not going to add any of that bistre. That's going to kind of help me decide where my shading is. Okay, so I do a little bit of that with the pencil itself, and then of course I am going to activate, and it is going to pull this color up and soften it to where it doesn't look quite so I don't know, starkly outlined, right? But that is basically what I'm doing here. You want to make sure your pencil's good and sharp. I am kind of going around the edges because I do feel like it needs that definition. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I colored this one, and then the next basket I will, I think I just skip forward to the rest of the coloring. But at any point, if you feel like right here, I wipe off because I really don't want things to get too dark, right? But I just kind of wipe off really well, and then I go ahead and I activate, and I allow myself to bring in just a touch of that color smudging here and there, right? And then I'm bringing that color into the shadowing of this basket. Okay, starting with our little hedgehog, I went in with this warm gray, and I was thinking I was going to base it. It's a lot lighter than I originally intended, I think, and so I go ahead and go in with the dark gray. Now, this spot that I just colored, don't color that. That's part of her apron, and I don't realize it until much, much later, but you can learn from my mistakes. The salmon, the dark flesh / salmon color, I am going to add to the ear as well. So you can do that at the same time. I am going to be adding, I think, raw umber, which is a brown tone, to this hedgie. And in retrospect, I wish I would have done a lot more of that and a little less of the gray. Because what happens is eventually we're going to fill up the tooth of this paper. And by the time I add the second layer of the brown, which after I do all the spikes and stuff, you're going to see it kind of smear a little bit. And that is just simply the tooth of the paper has been filled. And so when I go to move it with the colorless blender, not this time, but the next time that I add this color, you're going to see it just kind of push across the page. So, yeah, be aware of that. It's just something to think of. Okay. Also, I would probably base underneath the spindly things. I would base it with something like either that brown ochre or the cool gray, depending on which direction you want your hedgie to be. If you want her to be a little more brown or a little more gray. I like how it turns out with the hair. I enjoy using a cool gray, a dark gray, and a brown when doing hair tones like this, because I think it adds a variety of color and makes it look pretty cool, right? A little more realistic than just all one color. So I do like how that turns out, but I would base it first with either the brown ochre or the cool gray, just so that once you put your little spindlies on there, it looks like they're sitting on a color and not on white. Okay. Is it am I crushed? No. Overall, I like how the hedgehog turns out, but it's just something to note. Okay, now starting with the squirrel, I'm basically doing the same thing, only using a little bit different colors. I want her to have a red tone to her. So I'm using this burnt ochre, which is going to give that red tone without being like the berry red, right? More of a terracotta kind of color. And that's basically what I'm doing with the tail here as well, is I am going to base it in this color, activate it all out, and then go in and add some of my other colors. Okay. So I'm going to leave you to that. Some of the what's coming up next, coloring her hat and those kind of things, are pretty straightforward. If I see anything, I'll pop back in. Okay, popping back in here, you can see I did very similar things with both the squirrels. Now, as far as how I decide what I'm going to do as far as the rest of the colors, I thought I would share my thought process. So, in looking at my Hedgie, I decide that I want her outfit to be like red and white stripes and that kind of thing. And so, what I'm going to do is pull in colors from the berries. I'm going to bring in those colors into the stripes. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing with the squirrel's apron. This color is determined by the color. Don't color that long one. That's part of I think, like a rope or something, or not a rope, like a tree limb. I thought it was part of this apron. But anyway, I chose this color. This is one of the colors that's in the basket. And then I'm also going to be using the lighter yellow color, which will be in some of the flowers. So I'm trying to repeat the colors that I'm using elsewhere in the page, even if I use them in different proportions, or if I add another color to change the color, it'll still have the underlying base the same. And that is one of the things that helps make your page cohesive. Yeah, you see here, I finally got it together and realized that was a part of her apron. Luckily, her body wasn't colored super dark, and I was able to do that. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the squirrel above her apron. I am going to use the colors that I used for those red purple berries. I'm going to use on her apron. Now, I could have just chosen one of those colors, right? But I went ahead and layered it just like I did the berries so that they're very similar colors. So that is what I'm going to do there. Okay. So once again, in determining what colors to use, I used colors already on the page. I brought in the red violet, or the light red violet, I think it is, and the May green, and the ivory, and that lighter yellow tone that I've used in other areas on the page, so that when we're looking at everything, nothing is jarringly different. Apologies for my hair. I'm not exactly sure what it's doing right at the moment. I will say when I was coloring this, I was sick. I wasn't feeling great. I would have moments of feeling better than other times, and I would come in and color. But I was mainly sleeping, and so you can see my hair reflected that. All right, so now we're going to be coloring Yururi, and basically he is kind of the same as we did all the other critters, just a light base and then adding the cheeks and some shadowing. also coloring the squirrels the same way as I did the other ones, selecting clothing colors based on how I did the others as well by bringing in elements like this lower guy's gonna have like the raspberry or the black raspberry or blueberry or black raspberry, I guess. I'm going to be using those colors in his shorts. The one on the top, I bring in that yellow and the colors that you will use like in the baskets for his shorts, just to kind of keep all of those colors consistent. Okay. Okay, I'm using chromium oxide green. What you didn't see was I used chromium oxide green extra dark to do the lower right hand corner. And this is a yellow oxide shade. I'm just using that to bring in kind of a more brownish, ochre kind of color to kind of depict more like maybe a pathway or some dirt, right? But I'm just using my pan pastels to color these areas because it's just a little too much to do with pencil. Here I'm showing you the extra dark like I did on the other side. What you'll notice is I chose to do the pan pastel work after coloring the majority of the page. And the reason that I did that is because the pencil work almost acts as a resist. Now, you can lay this on top of pencil, but you can also wipe it off fairly easily. Now here I kind of brush that off and I'm going in with just the regular chromium oxide shade, not the extra dark. I'm lightening up as I go up, and as I go to the center, I am going to use an even lighter color. And I want to brush off that exact same sponge, right? But I'm just using the same one. But you can see this color lighter. But I found that I feel like pan pastel does a really good job in these kind of situations where you just have so much, right? This is the yellow shade. It's basically the same colors, just going light, medium, dark, right? Except for the brown ochre one. But anyway, I like to do the pencil work a lot of times first, especially when you have a lot of intricate decals like this, because what you're going to find is I will show you how I then take my what is that called? The kneaded eraser, and I can very easily remove this pan pastel. Okay. If my background is largely an open background, sometimes I will do the pan pastel work first, simply because then I can choose my other shades accordingly. It's really how you prefer to work, but your background can very much influence. You may love how your page is looking, and then you put like a really dark background in, and all of a sudden everything looks washed out. Or you might put, this is just a light turquoise blue that I use for the sky. It's a tint. I believe this is turquoise tint. But you can put a really light background in and suddenly everything looks really dark and heavy-handed. So that is why sometimes people struggle with backgrounds. Now, here I'm putting a light background in and a dark background in. And personally, I feel like when I add this blue, do you see how it really just brought the page to life? Like, I feel like, look at the right-hand side to the left-hand side before I add this here. I just think it makes a world of difference. It just really brightens things up and adds, it takes away from the heaviness of the page, right? So it's really how you prefer to do it. But oftentimes when I have small areas of background to work with, like here in between all these leaves, I will do the pencil work first. So now this is just turquoise. It's just one shade darker, and I'm just adding it a little bit to the top, and like randomly kind of almost, because this is sky and I don't want that sky completely even. And by doing this, it almost gives the illusion that there's some cloud work in there, right? Without doing a whole bunch of work trying to get clouds. Now, you can also add in colors and use your kneaded eraser to erase and bring in clouds by erasing. But I really like how this blue is making this page pop. Now, this is turquoise shade, so this is the next darkest color, and it's a much more muted color. It has a lot more gray in it, and so I skipped. There's turquoise tint, turquoise light, then turquoise shade, and then turquoise shade extra dark. Okay, almost all of the pan pastels have 5 different shades. Some have 6, some don't have all 5, but the majority do. And so what I've done is I did the turquoise tint, which is the lightest, then the turquoise light. Those are in the sky. Then I skipped the bright turquoise, which is your primary turquoise tone, and went ahead and went into the shade where they've added the gray for this blanket. I could have used the brighter turquoise. I just felt like it would be too much pop, right? I'm using a more muted color here so that the berries sing, so that the little critters' rosy cheeks sing. If I were to have added just turquoise, it might have been pretty, but I feel like the eye would be like, where do I look? Where do I look? Whereas this is almost a neutral tone, right? It has the blue from the sky that I'm pulling in, but it doesn't scream blue. It's almost like gray, right? So it's more of a neutral. Now, bear in mind, color choices. I have seen color choices, or sometimes I'll ask Christine, what do you think I should use here? And if she doesn't answer gold, which she'll laugh when she hears this, she may pick a color that I'm like, really? And it will be totally different than maybe I would have chosen. Or sometimes I'll see someone color a page, and the colors that they've picked, I'm like, wow, I never ever would have chosen that color. So there is no right or wrong. This is just me telling you why I choose the colors that I choose. So if you choose different colors, don't feel like you're doing something wrong. Okay? It's a stylistic choice. Okay? But I do feel like I like hearing why people choose colors. Now, this is the next darkest, and I'm just going to run this color as a shadow, like under my baskets, under the little critter, that kind of stuff, okay? Just for a little bit of visual interest, okay? What was I saying? Just go with what you like, okay? Because I am a big believer that art should be about what you like. And if other people like it, hey, that's great, as long as you like it, okay? But if you're trying to create art for someone else, I don't think it's ever going to work. Now, don't get me wrong. I like to duplicate people's art because it forces me to think like them. And that can be a great learning experience, right? And by mimicking what I'm doing here, the next time you color a page, you might go, oh, I remember when Wendy used one shade darker for Now this is the very lightest that I put in the sky. I'm just adding a little highlights and smoothing things out. That's all. You might say that and go, maybe I'll try that on this page. And it might work fantastic and it might not. Now here I'm showing you how I go in, and you can see that I've gotten a little bit of the sky on those leaves. And I am just very lightly dabbing the pencil or the eraser on it, and that pan pastel just pops right off. Okay? And it's not taking my color. Now, I am not pushing down. I am not like smushing it in and pulling it out like I'm trying to erase. I am literally trying to just get that very top layer of, you know, the pan pastel from the sky off of the other elements. That's what I'm doing here. Okay. Okay, so here I'm trying out some different things. I used a little bit of ivory here. That's what I'm doing here. That first, if you look underneath my hand, which you know you can because you're amazing, I have kind of played with some of the colors up there. And what I decided was I really like the look of the cold gray for the veining and the ivory for the flower. Okay, that is how I chose to do it. So you see me smoothing all of that out. Now, those two petals where I experimented, I just left them there. It could be a reflection from, you know, her apron or something. It's not a big deal. I doubt that you even noticed it until we got to this point. So don't stress it. I didn't show it on camera, but that was me kind of testing it. But here I'm using the cold gray, and then I'm going to go back in and add pops of ivory. And this is going to make these petals look white, right? Because white is white, but it still has shadows, and the shadows have color. Now, you have a lot of different choices in what color those could be. I could have used a light blue. I could have used a darker gray. I could have used just the ivory. I could have went in with a brown. There's a lot of different things that we could do. I personally just liked how this one turned out. Okay. Now, I'm going around the centers of these flowers. I looked up strawberry flowers. I don't know why I had it in my head that those were strawberry flowers, even though there literally isn't a strawberry on the page, but they must come from the same family because they looked just like these flowers. And I went in with that May green and then the yellow ochre, and I really like how those centers turned out. I think they looked so pretty. And then I go in with that same yellow ochre and I go over all the little, are those stamen? I think they're called stamen. And I just really like how these flowers turned out. Now, you could choose, instead of doing this, you could have taken a fine liner and done that. That is definitely a good use of a fine liner here. But I didn't. I just used what I had at hand. You notice that long piece right under the bow? I just whited that out with white Posca. To me, it's not drawing unwanted attention now. I don't think I color it green. I feel like the yellow here is kind of a nice reflection from the apron, but to me, they just make them look a little livelier. And then I'm using the same ivory to color the egg. So I'm going to go ahead and let you color the egg, and I'll pop back in a bit. All right, so I thought that these flowers just needed a little pop of color, so I am going in with some Bistra. I don't even think I activate these, I just add a little darkness here by using them dry, which is totally fine to do. And then I'm going to add a little bit of white on the tips with my paint pen. Okay guys, we are all done. I did not film the final step, which was adding the white dots, which is just a simple white dot to all the berries, a little bit here on the flowers, little on the buttons here and on the eyes, and really that's about it. I guess I did make 2 marks here, but I didn't do a whole lot with the white paint pen. I felt like this was pretty just as is, okay? I did spray the entire thing with fixative. Here is Christine's page. Is it not stunning? I love that in many ways our pages are very similar, and yet she did all of her berries in one color and the lovely stripes on her blanket. And all of her colors are just so beautiful. As always, I appreciate buddy coloring with you, Christine, and I appreciate you all watching this and subscribing, giving a like, dropping a comment, hitting the hype, whatever you feel like doing. It just lets YouTube know that you don't think my channel sucks. So if you can do any or all of those things, I would be most grateful. And until next time, happy coloring. Thank you for watching another video from Jazzydoodledesigns. If you'd like even more Jazzydoodle and a little more snark, please check out the membership below. If you're looking for a community where you can share your work and chat with other fellow colorists in a safe and welcoming environment, hit the subscribe button to Jazzydoodledesigns and then look for Jazzydoodledesigns Coloring Community on Facebook. And there you can join a group of fellow colorists to talk all things coloring and share cute pet pictures. I hope to see you there, and until next time, happy coloring.